Welcome back to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. And if you're watching the replay or on YouTube, thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. Now, today we welcome Amy Perras to the podcast. Through igniting her love of writing as a Chicago area and National Writing Project Fellow, Amy created her first book, Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid Woman, aimed at helping people break free and recover from narcissistic abuse. Her second, Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid Teacher, explores her 29 years of teaching experience in both the Los Angeles and Chicago area public schools. She plans to write more in this series, hence how her podcast and YouTube channel were born. In her spare time, Amy enjoys thrifting, ice skating, swing and salsa dancing, having coffee in the car without coffee as her friends drive her to the train because she no longer owns a car, leading a life group through her church in Chicago, and taking her 15-year-old Chihuahua Duke for walks around the city, including many trips on planes, trains, and the megabus. As a certified life coach, she specializes in helping you walk in your purpose as you explore your values and priorities. Because without clarity or alignment to your values, you may as well just toss that to-do list in the trash. Authenticity is also key to flying with eagles and leaving the ducks behind. Now, during the podcast, we discuss how Amy built a cage from herself from the age of 3 and what that means. What types of narcissistic abuse there are. We talk about Christianity, spirituality, and how all roads lead to God. The definition of gaslighting and why everyone should watch the movie Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman to understand that meaning. The lies we believe and the lies that the church tells women. What to do to free yourself from narcissistic abuse. Now, stay to the end to find out why staying in high stress and fight or flight mode will take a toll on your sanity and your health. At the end of the episode, make sure you visit drmichellegordon.com/podcasts, where you can find the show notes, plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And if you enjoy the episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for all of the 5-star reviews. Now, if you haven't left a review yet, please take the time to review the podcast. This helps more women to find it and get the help they need during the disruption of menopause. No one should have to go it alone. And thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement. Now, let's get to Amy. All right. Wow. Amy, welcome to the Menopause Movement Podcast.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here. So what is interesting, I think, about you, and what I think is really apt for our audience, is you help women kind of get out of relationships with narcissists. Is that?
Yeah.
So let's hear the story of how you got into that.
Well, it's funny. I grew up in a home of know-it-alls. I won't say that I won't call them narcissists, but my brother and sister are like national merit scholars and very, intellectual. And you sit in a room with them and you're the one that's, your opinion doesn't matter, and you have to play small. And that's kind of how I grew up. And I was the crazy one, the funny one, the weirdo, the actor's type, the performer. And so it really goes back to, well, my dad was definitely a narcissist. He's gone now, so I can speak about it. But if you grow up with someone that invalidates your feelings and you play small in the environment you're in, and I know I do have a little bit of a joke here. It's not really a joke, but my mom, I was the third kid in the family, and my parents divorced when I was 3, and my mom was obviously overwhelmed. So I was always in a playpen back in the 60s. You remember the playpen, the cage? Mm-hmm. So my brother and sister were roaming free in the background, just in the backyard. And I would be sitting in this cage with my stuffed animals. And I know as a 3-year-old, that sounds weird that you would even be sitting there interpreting like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I sitting in this cage? And you interpret it in a way that makes you feel like, well, I must be a nuisance then. I must be something wrong with me, that sort of thing. So again, that childhood stuff, it starts the ball rolling, but it doesn't mean you got to stay there. So.
Right. Okay. So I just want to understand. So you had your brother and sister were playing and you were stuck inside a playpen, and the story you told yourself,
Yes.
the way that you made it make sense for yourself was that you didn't really matter.
The narrative, you're right. The narrative we tell ourselves is very much the problem. And I don't think throughout my life walked around with low self-esteem. I got a lot of praise and I felt good inside. And yet because I turned a lot of my feelings inward, because I think that I grew up with a Scandinavian mother too. And I think that if you know anything about that, they're very, very much you can't talk about feelings and you just shut down. So you know, it wasn't like you could, and I didn't get physical touch either. She never really held me. The only time she held me was when I had an earache. So I get a lot of earaches. So she could rock me, you know? So throughout my childhood, even through college, I got earaches. I don't have earaches anymore, but
wait, let's back up to that, because I think that's really key. You know, one of the things that, you know, we have a program, it's called the MENO system, and we help women go from MENO misery, you know, where the symptoms are really kind of holding, you know, really keep making turning their life upside down and just really being a problem, to MENO-mate, and they start living the MENO-mate way and nothing bothers them anymore. And, you know, we talk a lot about the stories that we tell ourselves. And so, you know, I've heard you say just in this, you know, brief introduction that, you know, you're craving physical touch. And so the way that your subconscious managed that for you was to give you earaches.
Yes.
And until you realized that subconscious programming, you know, and started to unravel that, you continue to have earaches. And I just think that's really fascinating, because one of the things we talk about a lot is the fact that as children, we don't have the adult history to filter our experiences. And so we create our own, you know, cage, in a sense, of thought. And until we grow up and we start to, you know, if we start to unravel these stories, like what is causing me to believe that? What is causing me to think that I am not worthy? What is causing me to think that I belong in a cage? What is causing me to think that my feelings are invalid? Because of all the stories that we told ourselves as we were kind of coming through the experiences. And so, I just think that's really fascinating.
It's fun. I like how you use the
really
word.
Work with.
You use the word cage too. It's funny that I was literally interpreting my life like an animal in a cage.
Yeah.
And man, I'm thinking I'm processing some feelings as we talk about this. I was always feeling, and I still do, in a relationship, feel like I was always in a cage. I always felt like I had to play small, or I had to, you know, tiptoe around the person I was with. And wow, I just processed that as we talked.
Let's unpack it then.
Yeah.
So what's the big aha here?
Well, I think I thrive on being alone, and COVID, I have loved every minute of it in terms of the alone time. And yet I don't like the tugging at me factor. So I know that I've trained myself, maybe because of my day job as a high school teacher. I've gotten so tired of people all day, because I appear to be an extrovert, but I get my fuel from being alone. So again, even as the job I chose, if you notice, I'm in a cage, a classroom. I'm in a system that is oppressive. I am not able to truly be who I am a bit. You have autonomy as a teacher, right? But this whole be who you are is like, it's one of the greatest things. Like I finally, in my 50s, which is what I love about being in my 50s, you finally get to a point where you're like, I don't care what you think. Yeah. I'm going to do me. I'm going to thrive. I'm not going to allow the world to tell me who I am or what I should subscribe to. So the cage factor, I'm like, I live in a very small apartment as well. And I don't ever want to have a big house. That makes me like get hives. I don't know, because there's a loneliness in a big house, right? There's all these empty rooms and there's high ceilings. And
it depends. It depends on the story you decide to tell yourself about
That's
it.
Right. I mean, that's so good.
I have a big house and I love it because I've got space here for my office and I've got a gym. And it's been, I mean, COVID hasn't been that bad for me. I mean, I'm a surgeon, but I quit surgery. And I don't have to go back to the hospital. You know, I'm working on the podcast and working on changing women's lives, you know, pretty much from the inside out. You know, kind of reframing what menopause really is. And, we look at menopause, and menopause is a time in our life where we can like become empowered and really become who we want to be. It's the time for us to reinvent who we are. And what I love about my own menopause experience is that I've been able to kind of unpack all this programming that I had from when I was a child. And one of the stories that I've told a few times on the podcast is that when I was 5 years old, I made this decision because of something my mother said, was that I couldn't make money unless I was a doctor. So that subconscious program. So I had to become a doctor in order to make money because my mother had two brothers, like a brother and a brother-in-law who were doctors. And she made some comment when I was 5 years old that, they're rich, they're doctors, they're rich. And so I wanted to make my mom happy. And so I said, okay, to my 5-year-old self, interpreted that as, okay, the only way I can make money is to be a doctor. And I didn't unpack that.
Well, that's not a bad prophecy. I mean, she could have said the only way to make money is marry a rich man or something like that. Look at what you did. Okay, I'll be a doctor.
But she didn't say that. See, she said, those guys are rich, they're doctors. And my 5-year-old brain says, I have to be a doctor to make money. And so my subconscious programming, I mean, I didn't start medical school till I was 31. And so my subconscious programming made me go to medical school. And, eventually I was able to figure out how to make a lot of money, but then I was like, I'm not fulfilled in this. This is not what I'm called to do.
No.
And so, over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I've been, studying menopause and figuring out why I have hot flashes and why I feel like shit sometimes and why, and why my emotions were taking over. And so, and I was like, well, this is not what I'm called to do. And then I started to do, the menopause movement and started to help women. And I'm like, oh, this is my calling.
That's
and I was able to leave surgery. So this comes back to what you said about be who you are, and sometimes who we are is somebody very different from who we think we've been, or the identity that we've constructed because of what people have told us or how the story that we told ourselves. And what I think menopause is such a great time for us to unpack every single belief that we've ever had about ourselves. So, So let's talk a little bit about on your outline. You said something about this word situationship.
Yes.
So talk about what is a situationship?
Well, a lot of times when you don't really know who you are, or even maybe don't want to be in a cage in a relationship, a lot of times people, they call them situationships, right? It's like an Urban Dictionary word where it's not like your boyfriend and girlfriend. It's not like you're dating, but you maybe the hookups happening, or that's another reason.
Like a friend with benefits?
Yes. And, I used to believe that even as a Christian, I used to think, oh, that can't apply to me. That's archaic. I can totally have sex outside of marriage. No problem. And then I would just be like thinking about when I was a kid, not a lot of touch. Right. So then I craved the touch. And because of that, the promiscuity never gave me any fulfillment. If anything, I think it brought more destruction into the narrative. I tell myself it brought me more destruction. And I don't think I consciously walk around with low self-esteem, but something in my subconscious, obviously, the daddy issues didn't help, daddy leaving, getting married a couple times and showing up in and out of my life, all that. I don't, like, even today, I don't really walk around with that because I have a relationship with God. I think that has a lot to do with it. But that whole situationship, or a tolerationship, somebody you're in, maybe even in a marriage, and everybody's doing the eye rolling. And to me, if you're eye rolling a lot in your relationship, that's a tolerationship. That's not a relationship,
Toleration.
So I think I've seen a lot of marriages too, where I'm like, whoa, okay, nope. And you try to think to yourself, okay, all right, I'm open. Only if God sends him, because I'm not up to, like, going on the apps and that, meeting someone and all that, and getting validation from other people. I think that's one of the mistakes we make as women. We try to get validation from other people. And that, again, causes, that's that whole situationship. It's like a drug, right? You can get your thrills, and then a couple of days later, it's you come down off that high, and it's like, like, I've never done heroin, but I mean, it's something that I think does, same thing to the brain, right? You're the doctor here, but
it's well, I think we should talk a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit about Christianity and sex. And the one thing I have to say is that Christianity's got a really view of sex. Okay.
I know.
It does.
I know.
And, I mean, I grew up in the church. I grew up Catholic, and then I became, like a born again Pentecostal type. And then I was an atheist after that
we
for
have
a
a
while.
similar story. That's a similar pattern that I have.
And then I discovered this guy right here, Yogananda. He wrote this book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And that book changed my life because it made everything make sense. But what has happened, I think, is that over the millennia, people have taken the words of this guy who was so amazing and so in touch with God and in such congruence with what his message was supposed to be. And he was able to perform miracles, and he was able to just always be in touch. And he taught his disciples how to get in touch with God. And then through the years, people made it better, rewrote it, changed it. And so it's filtered into what we have now, which I think is very, very far from the message that he actually gave us.
Well, you say he, you're talking about.
I'm talking about Christ.
Okay, Jesus. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my book, I talk about how I had MS. I got healed of it in a charismatic church, lay hands, fall out, totally healed, go back to the doctor, the brain's gone clear. Then I get Lyme disease. And I think it was chronic Lyme disease. It said active and chronic Lyme disease. I had all these symptoms. And I got delivered from that by a demonic deliverance ministry. So since then, I have to kind of keep the doors closed to what they say. If you have demonic deliverance, right, you got to keep the doors closed to the demons coming back. So even bitterness can bring in a demon, or sex outside of marriage. And I know this is archaic, but this is something that I have learned. Listen, this is something I have learned in my own body. It says that you sin against your own body, you open the door to this.
Sure.
So that's where
right. But here's the thing. And this is, I think, the message of Christ. And this is why I think that we've really bastardized the message of Christ, is because we are children of God, right? We can agree there. And as children of God, we are entitled to our inheritance, which is the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And nothing is going to separate us from that except for us. And the way we separate ourselves from that is by creating our own hell through our beliefs and our thought patterns.
Yeah, you can beat yourself up a lot.
And while there is this whole, in the Pentecostal charismatic side of Christianity, there's this whole thought of, demon possession and demons and all of these things and getting delivered. At the end of the day, what that is simply separation. And it's from separation God. because of our belief in what Yogananda will call Maya. But at the end of the day, it's just earthbound consciousness. So I really have a hard time with anybody, the whole, I don't really ascribe to the whole thought that we can be delivered of demons, because the demons that we have are our thoughts. And once we can start to understand that our thoughts create our reality, and the thoughts that we think, if we think these same thoughts over and over and over again, that's going to create our hell on earth. We can change that. We can change our narrative.
Do you also think then that you can heal yourself from disease like Lyme disease or MS just by changing your thoughts?
Yes. The brain is very, very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So the miracles happen from a change in our brain. And if you study Joe Dispenza he actually does scientific studies of, he gets people into a certain type of meditative state, and they will be healed of, cancer, and they'll be healed of all sorts of things. And so, is it supernatural? He's got a book called Becoming Supernatural, which I highly recommend. He's also got another one called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, another really great book. What he does is he will measure certain things like IgA, immunoglobulin A, which is a marker of our immunity. And people who haven't been able to walk are able to walk after these meditations. And the point is that we live most of the time in our conscious mind, 5%, right? But we've got 95% of our programming is in our subconscious. Yeah. And so if we can get into our subconscious and change that programming, then we can be healed. But the way we get there is variable. There's many ways to get there. You can get there through, a demonic deliverance. You can get there through prayer and laying out of hands. Laying out of hands is really powerful. You can get there through meditation and activation of the pineal gland. At the end of the day, the very first spirituality was yoga. And Christ taught yoga at the, and when you look at it, we don't know where he was between the ages of about 13 and 30, right? And there's evidence he was in India learning yoga.
I did not know that. I used to do hot yoga.
Yeah, but it's not the same. So the yoga that you're thinking is just moving your body. But when you start to delve into, the gift of India is spirituality. India, all of spirituality kind of emanates from India. And when you read the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, there are so many similarities with the Trinity, and there's just a lot there. And my job is not to unpack your faith, because I don't want to do that. And if your belief is that, that you're saved through the blood of Christ, fine. I'm not, that's not my, you believe what you want to believe, because all spirituality leads to the same place. Doesn't matter. Right. And that's, I think, the mistake of Christianity, thinking that there's only one way to get to God, but there's all spirituality leads to the same place,
but all spirituality
leads there.
Yeah. And when I was reading the Bible after this deliverance, after I got out of that bad relationship, I kept reading like idol worship. And I was like, what? I was randomly opening the Bible, idol worship. I'm not an idol worshiper. I'm not an idol worshiper. And then it took me to some verses about sexual immorality is idolatry. So that was where something was like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait. So when I put me on the throne, and it's like, that's where I was disconnecting from God, because I was on the throne. So if I look back on it, even too, like low self-esteem, it's not about self-love. It's, to me, about God's love will give you that self-esteem if you look at yourself through his eyes, but also have a relationship with him, which I think people don't have a relationship with him because they're like, oh, I'm a sinner and I don't want to go to God. And they go with this shame, but God is a God of love.
Well, again, we go back to the fact that we are children of God, and God is both male and female. And unfortunately, because of the patriarchy turned God into a male, but our God is male and female, all
the Holy
genders.
Spirit, they say, because of the Trinity, they say the Holy Spirit has like the feminine energy or whatever.
There's another way of looking at the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the embodiment of our higher self, the one that we can contact through meditation or prayer, that will actually make things happen. Right. But when you look at God as just God and genderless, and we have the truth of when we return to the love, right? And we are the children of God. And so as a child of God, we have a birthright. And when we grab on and say, I want that birthright, and I want, and we don't let go, then we can say, let's go back to love. And that's where Marianne Williamson's book, A Return to Love, kind of comes into play. And other metaphysical texts like A Course in Miracles and things like that. But there's many paths.
Well, Marianne Williamson, isn't she the one who said, we're afraid of success, kind of like that whole playing small is part of our problem, but success is what
I wouldn't know.
I'm really bad at misquoting, but I know that she has something to do with like, we're not afraid of our failures, we're afraid of the power that's within us, or something to that effect. And I think
that's actually can be true. I mean, I think there are some people who are really afraid of failure as well. But I have to say that once I mean, just to kind of close the loop on spirituality, and then kind of get back to narcissism, the biggest change in my life came when I started a spiritual practice and got out of my own way. And just kind of got into the allowing. And so my encouragement for anyone who's listening or watching this podcast episode is to say that this spiritual practice is whatever you make of it. It's going to change your life no matter. And if all you do is sit for 5 minutes every morning in silence, that's a good enough start.
Very effective.
And you don't even have to have thoughts on God. You don't even have to believe in God, but a way to silence your brain and start to realize that, to train your brain. That's probably the most life-changing advice I can give.
Very great advice. I think that whole side, the chemistry of the brain is very much, God's in all that too.
Oh yeah. God's everywhere.
Healing. Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny, if we're going to transition into narcissism, my book describes it as demonic. So
that's all right. Narcissism is really, it's a true belief in self over everything else.
Yes.
Right? Putting yourself in the middle of everything. And it's interesting because when I was married to my husband we got married in 1988, and then we had a really, really bitter divorce, and we had to do psychological testing because we had a kid, and everybody involved, there were 4 people involved that had to get tested. It was me, it was my ex-husband, it was my ex-husband's then fiance, who he's since divorced, and the woman that I was with at the time. And every single one of us were narcissists based on that psychological assessment. Every single one of us. And so we and I was looking at it and I was like, okay. And then I start, and so now, like when I talk to my brother, so, everyone in my family's gone except for my brother. So I had 2 older brothers and then our parents, and I have 1 younger brother. And so everybody's passed away. And my younger brother and I talk a lot about how my parents were both narcissists, and they raised a family of narcissists.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so undoing all that narcissism has been kind of my life's work.
Good for you, because most narcissists don't even think they have a problem, nor do they care to fix themselves. So that's like, I guess we're all on the spectrum, and you were on the lower end. But that's beautiful.
It's hard to say. It was really only about me. It was only about me for years and years and years.
It's funny that you would attract a narcissist. Usually narcissists are attracted, or they okay, I heard this. They date up. You have it, like if you have an energy that's positive and you're successful and you're really doing well in life, they want a piece of that, right? So they can like kind of glom onto you and then ride the coattails of your success. But in the midst of that, they beat you down. Like they only like you when you're down. They gaslight you. They invalidate your reality. It's an insane making situation. And I'm shocked that you were with 2 narcissists together. I haven't done any studies on that, but wow.
Yeah. No, my ex-husband was a narcissist. My ex-girlfriend at the time, very narcissistic. So I tend to attract the narcissists.
Oh, and now you're attracting. See, isn't that interesting? Now that you're getting healthier, you're attracting the narcissists.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Oh,
but we're so me-centric. So remember, but kind of now I go back to the spiritual side of things. At the end of the day, what's happening here on earth is that we are spiritual beings who choose to come, live in a bag of skin, and our job is to get back to spirituality, get back to who we really are. And so when we start to really understand that the body is limiting because we are truly pure consciousness, that's, at the end of the day, it's just awareness, right? And when we can get past, we start to like really get past the limitations of the body, and become and start to understand that we are awareness inside, and you can get there through prayer, you can get there through God consciousness, you can get there through yoga and meditation. But when you start to realize that, then it's the things that seem important to the narcissistic people stop feeling important.
Oh,
right. Yes. And so for me, becoming aware and starting, and I think it all kind of plays in, with me quitting surgery and, it all because at the end of the day, now I'm not focused on me or my career anymore. I'm focused on wanting to, my role now is to assist other women into becoming who they are, who their best.
Isn't that's selves. Beautiful. That's truly where we're meant to be. It's like the focus off the self and onto others is when I think the true joy and peace comes into your life.
Absolutely.
So that's beautiful.
So if I'm somebody who's starting to realize that I'm in a narcissistic, in a relationship with a narcissist, and let's just define gaslighting, because not everybody knows what that is.
Yeah.
So let's,
Well,
let's start with that.
if you see the Ingrid Bergman's movie in the 1930s called Gaslight, it really explains it well. And I'm going to explain it through that medium. A man married her. She had a lot of money, married her. And then as he was stealing from her in the attic, the lights would flicker. And she would be like, honey, the lights are flickering, when he'd come down from the attic. And he's like, no, they don't flicker. They're not flickering. What are you, crazy? You're going crazy. And, it's like, oh, so you can say you'll be in a relationship and you feel like something's wrong in the room, or you feel invalidated. And I know just little things like, I have a dog and we were going to go on a trip. And I said, did you make sure it's a dog friendly cabin? And he flips out and he just like, bah! And then I'm like, well, wait. And then he tells me later, well, you need to ask me, I have a question for you before you ask me a question. Now that might not be gaslighting. That might just be straight up abuse. Control, right?
That's control.
But gaslighting, I'm just thinking about the times.
I mean, let's maybe it's more like this. It's gaslighting, I think, in my experience, is when you're out at a restaurant and you order the fish and he orders a steak, and you go back and you say, hey, how was that steak? I didn't have steak. What are you talking about? I had the fish.
Yes. That reminds me then of another story. I had a walk on the river walk in Chicago. Beautiful walk, but I hated it because of his mood. He was cranky. And then later he says, that was the most amazing walk. And I'm like, in my head going, it stunk. Are you kidding me with your mood? So yeah, that twisting. That's that word.
The twisting of reality. So gaslighting is like trying to, makes you question your sanity.
But coming from someone who would be a self-proclaimed narcissist, can you explain that behavior? Why do they do that?
I can't. I mean, I think I didn't
Recovering
know.
narcissist.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think I think it's like a reality strategy.
Yeah. It's a control issue.
Again, yeah, it is control. I mean, I wasn't a big gaslighter. It's not something I recognized until I noticed it was happening to me. So I can't recall ever using that strategy as a means of control. I just always wanted my own way.
Yeah.
I still want my own way.
Sure.
And I want to be right. And I want to be right.
Yeah, that's why being single is so great, because you always get your own way.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, you have to compromise, and so I'm, of course, in my second marriage, we've got it's our 7th anniversary coming up in my second marriage, and we've been together for 15 years, and it's interesting because it has been a lot of compromise, and me trying to find myself throughout this whole time. My wife is really, she's always known what she wanted to do, and she's doing her thing. And me, I've been reinventing myself the whole time, so she's been very accommodating, we'll say.
That's beautiful. That's
supportive.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So let's see here. Let's talk about some of the lies that we tend to believe about ourselves when it comes to managing a relationship or trying to get out of narcissism.
One of the things that when you're in it, I know some people, they don't really want to leave the relationship, but what you can do if you're still going to stay in it is you could still just play the game of not reacting, because I know narcissists love a good reaction. They love a lot of drama. So if they can, they'll say something to you that is a straight up lie. And instead of reacting like, I don't do that, you can just simply say, I'm okay with your false perception of me. And that shuts them up. Or, your anger is not my responsibility. And that shuts them up.
This has
things
nothing
like
to
that.
do with me.
Exactly.
This has nothing to do with me.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That is the key. I think if you're in those kinds of relationships and you have 5 kids and you don't want to leave, whatever, there's ways that you can protect yourself that are going to definitely, it's not going to make you maybe thrive in the relationship, but I think just do your own thing, have your own hobbies. Don't wait for her to come home and with the meal, just that whole like expectations of time and there's the relationship, and then there's you and your partner, right? So you do need to put the relationship first, but at the same time, don't lose yourself in the midst of that.
Right. I think it's really common. I mean, if you think about the way that we have relationship, there's very few examples in the media of happy or healthy relationships. And so we only know if you look at the media and you want to kind of get an idea of what a good relationship is, it's somebody who, immediately runs home and has, like hurried sex, right? That's how they always get to know each other. And then after that, everything is rosy. You get your Prince Charming or whatever. And that's, so healthy relationships aren't necessarily modeled for us. And if we want to have a healthy relationship, we have to go out and really search for that, because a healthy relationship has to do with listening and boundaries. And even when you're in a sexual relationship with someone, you still need boundaries. You still need, you need physical boundaries, you need psychological boundaries. Boundaries are so important to the health of who we are as humans. And so actually there's a really good book on boundaries. I can't remember the name of it, but I mean, it's called Boundaries. I can't remember the author.
Is it Dr. Henry Cloud?
No, it's by a Christian lady. It's based in Christianity.
Yeah. So Dr. Henry Cloud is also a Christian. He has a boundaries.me membership. It's like $9 a month. And that's been helpful. Like a lot of videos. I like to consume books, but he has it through videos. Very good.
Let me just look at what it's called. Boundaries. I'm just when to say yes, when to say no, to take control of your life. And what I can't find, let me see if I can find it on Google or something. Because I want to show the picture.
Yeah. Boundaries are something I'm still working on. Like I don't have any relationship with any kind of like romantic relationship right now, but even with friendships, I'm still struggling with certain like feelings that come up. And then what's this feeling? And why am I feeling this
Henry
way?
Cloud and John Townsend.
Yeah.
Is that who you're talking about? Henry Cloud?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a membership there for $10 a month on learning about boundaries.
It's really good. Actually, I recommend it in my book. So
he's great. You can actually buy this book, Boundaries, for $5.
Awesome. I bought it back in my 20s. So, I met him and I bought it in my 20s.
On christianbook.com, and it's $5. Oops, this is something else. So so you can get, this is the book, and it's all key. About
boundaries is key, but that's another boundaries, one. Put that into practice.
And when you start to put in boundaries, you can disconnect from that narcissism, because the other problem I think with narcissistic people is they tend to reel people in and then make it, since everything's all about them, the narcissist who's looking into the water, right? I mean, that's Narcissus. You think about back Narcissus became a flower that overlooked.
I fell in love with himself.
So when you're living with a narcissist and you start to recognize that's happening, the narcissist is getting all of their validation from the control of you, right? When you can start to see yourself outside the relationship as somebody who is independent, and then that person, that narcissist, is no longer controlling you, you can actually say things like, no, this has nothing to do with me.
Yes.
Right. And so, but it does require you to change your thoughts. And that's why, in my program, the MENO system, it's a one-year experience. Actually, we actually go in depth into how to manage your thoughts, because, that's so important. Your thoughts make your reality. So,
I agree totally. And yet you mentioned like, the whole dating advice people get where you need to let the person chase you, and you need to that's the whole thing about the narcissist. They love bomb you for 3 months or whatever until they capture you. And you're perceiving it as, whoa, they really love me. And yet it's just a trap. So that's where I'm still working out my recovery right now. I'm still not sure about that next person that decides to think they're interested, So thought life, that's good.
Yeah. Well, it's just so key that we, I mean, listen, we think maybe 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And,
yeah,
80 to 90% of them are, negative, untrue, or not helpful. And so when we can not control, but when we can manage and change the thoughts in our mind, then we can, and, some of this comes back to spirituality and finding the bliss in being a child of God, or being a child of, or even, just listen, if you're an atheist, that's fine too. I have no judgment there, but just if you can get into a place, even transcendental meditation, where all you're doing is, repeating a mantra for 20 minutes, training the mind as if it were another muscle is so key.
I love that.
It's just so key to having a
Well,
life that is, fulfilling.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because in COVID, I got the COVID 10 pounds, and I usually have like an inner self-loathing about my body. I didn't realize I did. And yet lately, the last 2 days, I've been praying about it. And every time I walk and see myself in the mirror, or I'm walking the dog, I have been telling myself, wow, you looking good. Look at you. Look at, oh, you're beautiful. And I've never done that in 54 years. Tomorrow's my birthday.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
But I just was like, thank you. But I was like, what? All these years of self-loathing. And I used to have like what I call a booty rag. I would put a sweatshirt around my butt because I didn't want people to see it. And now I'm walking out without my booty rag. I'm like, here it is, everybody. Here it is.
Because that's fine.
So I just like, okay.
You're finding out who you are,
Yeah.
And how long have you been out of this relationship?
A year.
Okay. So you wrote a book about it?
Yeah.
What's the name of your book?
Not just about him. Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid Woman.
That's great.
I can explain that title if you need me to. I was writing a book, and I'm still writing a book, Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid Teacher. Because my mom, when I was 22 with an English degree, 2 months away from graduation, I'm like, what am I going to do with this English degree? And she said, why don't you be a teacher? I'm like, I ain't going to be no stupid teacher. And I remember verbatim, we grew up in the country, and I'm thinking that's where I got that vernacular. But it was like, wait a minute. So then I was writing that book, and then this happened, and I was processing it. And then I thought about all the patterns in my life. And I definitely have the preface is all about the plank in your own eye versus the speck, the Bible verse with, why are you worried about the speck in someone else's eye and not the plank in yours? So my preface is all about the plank in my own eye, but the book is about the speck in everybody else's. So kind of flipped. But I'm going to continue with Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid. I've got an Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid podcast. I've got an Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid YouTube channel now. And I've definitely, it's definitely following me. I know you're supposed to have all these wonderful, like, women empowerment, words for positive. Mine is definitely negative words, but I always think the mathematical 2 negatives make a positive. Ain't gonna be no stupid. So I thought it works.
Yeah, no, it works great. Yeah. So what is overfunctioning?
Well, what I see, again, that goes back to a Bible verse as well. I don't know the verse, but it's when Mary and Martha, Jesus is in their home, and Martha is running around making sure everything's fine and perfect and everything's like looking good. And Mary's just sitting there at his feet quietly. And I see too many, especially in the teaching profession, and just too many women. And if you think about it, like, they just do it all. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're working a full-time job, they're raising the children. And there's like a hamster wheel kind of behavior. And I think that a lot of times people do that, over function for validation, when the validation needs to come, as you were saying, sitting in silence for 5 minutes, sitting at Jesus's feet. And that is the place that you are going to find true freedom. And I just think that the whole denying ourselves is when we find ourselves, and not this busyness. And that includes television or everything we consume all day, every day, to keep us from that relationship with ourselves, the quietness, the peace. That's definitely something I think that women need to grow in, especially. We've been conditioned to be that way. We've been conditioned to be all about appearances. We've been conditioned to do it all and serve everybody. And I know it might be in our genes and DNA.
It's not in our genes. It's in the patriarchy. Okay, it's in our patriarchy. Yeah, the patriarchy is, I mean, you look at it, it's men have subjugated women, right? And again, I mention this book all the time. It's called The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And it's about how women became misogyny started when when written language started. We started using the other side of our brains, and all the female gods were killed. But all the gods initially were female, and then written language happened, and the male gods started killing the female gods. And this is all in history. It's a great book. I highly recommend it, and I mention it probably every other podcast.
Oh, nice.
And what has happened, I think, in history is that, men are stronger. They have testosterone, they have more muscle, and they have more physical power. And, if you look at the Nordic, the Nordic history, women were, they fought alongside men. They were there. There was a lot of like equality, but through the history, and you look at what happened in, say, the Muslim world, where women became really subjected to men, to the point that even having a female child was a negative, right? And and you think about the fact that there are no boys without a woman. There are no boys without a woman. I mean, we bear the children. And so the subjugation of women and it's just, it's a societal problem. It's like a scourge, I think, on listen, I guess I'm a feminist, I'm all for women's rights.
It's
and
about equality.
I'd love
too,
to see,
right?
I'd love to see the ERA done and, passed and stuff, but it's such a big problem. It's a big problem because of what Paul wrote, or the way that if you go back to Christianity, the way that Paul wrote about women in his letters. Women have to keep their heads covered. Women should keep silent in the church. Women, and so Paul was like a classic misogynist. And 10 lies the church. Go ahead and read out that title.
It says 10 Lies the Church Tells Women by Lee Grady. I haven't finished it, but it's all about debunking some of those beliefs. That women are inferior, that women cannot be leaders, that men should be ruling over the home, that women need to cover themselves, or that men are the covering for the woman. They can't work. I mean, this is
women have to subjugate themselves to the men. Women. What did he say? It was like, women, serve your husbands, right? Serve your husbands. You were serving God or something.
But I also think
subject yourself. It's not good. But at the end of the day, remember, Paul was just a dude who,
he was single too.
Well, he was probably gay, but I've got a thorn in my side. I can't get rid of it. Why do I do the thing I don't want to do? Right. Here he is on the road to Damascus, and Paul was on the road to Damascus, and Christ appeared to him. So this was before, maybe after the Pentecost. I can't remember. It might have been before the Pentecost, but I actually don't know the history. So if somebody wants to tell me, that's fine. Yeah. Christ appears to him, and he had been persecuting Christians. He had been killing Christians as a Jew. Christ appears to him, and he changes, right? And then he becomes the biggest, apostle, and starts to, he takes the place of Judas, because of course Judas, betrayed Jesus, and he had to pay the price for that, right? I think he killed himself. So then all these letters that he wrote to the church, these beginning churches became, they made it into the Bible, but the Bible was written by men, and it was written by men many years after the death of Christ. And so what we know about memory from our studies, what we know about memory is that memory is faulty. And so even the Gospels are the memories of men. They're not necessarily what Jesus said. They are the memories of men written years after his death. And we have taken this and said, oh, this is the word of God. But everything is filtered through the imperfect mind of man. And while we do have the mind of Christ, we get that when we meditate. We get that when we enter the kingdom of God. And the way to enter the kingdom of God is to, leave our body consciousness and start to understand that what we are is awareness.
I do have to disagree about the Bible because of the experience that I had with the book of John. John 4, the woman at the well, she had 5 husbands, and the man she was living with was not her husband. And he asked her for a drink, and she said, "Oh, why are you talking to me?" Because Samaritans were considered, and he's like, "The water I give you will be living water." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So the next day I went jogging, and I go, "Lord, whenever you're ready, you can come into my life." And I felt a rush of like water rush the minute I prayed that prayer. So I really do still encourage people to read the Bible just to get whatever they can. Try to debunk it.
I'm not saying the Bible. I'm not saying the Bible doesn't have good things to say, and I'm not saying that there aren't that what the men who wrote the Bible put down are, that some of that stuff is not accurate. I mean, there's really good metaphor in there, and there's really good lessons in there. And the woman at the well with Christ saying, the waters I give you will be the living waters. Yeah, okay, but again, those are not necessarily the exact words of Christ. Those are the words of Christ as remembered by somebody. And we know that our memories are faulty. Okay. And so could somebody have remembered it because of the way, they were in a trance state and they got, a download. I mean, there's certainly, I mean, listen, I love the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John starts with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so when you look at that and you understand that everything is vibration, and that we are both particle and wave, and we know this from quantum physics, then in the beginning was the word, which was a sound, which in the Bhagavad Gita is Om, right? So we have our Amen. So in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. It's all basically the origin of the universe. God was one thing, and then God split itself up so that God could experience itself. And so here we are.
Yeah, isn't that the whole Big Bang theory? Science and Bible does support when God spoke it into existence. There it is. Like that.
Well, is sure, like
and they work together. And I think we think it's binary. It's not science versus God. It's all together.
No, usually when there's an explosion, there's chaos. But in the Big Bang, when the Big Bang happened, it was order. Order came out of nothing. And so, there's many mysteries we don't understand.
Right.
But, I think at the end of the day that there's many ways to, and I didn't, my last 4 or 5 podcasts have all been about spirituality. And it's really interesting that
I think COVID has something to do with that. I really do.
COVID
I really
is
think it's a
resetting the
time.
world.
It really is. And I think it's like big time message is like, look inside yourself. What can you do with all the chaos in the world? You can start at home, right? You can start and dive into your own spirituality. And if I don't take care of my own heart and how I feel about other people, how am I going to change the world? No. So I love that this just so happened that your podcasts are all end up being spiritual talks, right? Because I think God has a message.
I think that there are many paths to spirituality, and at the end of the day, understanding that we are so much more than what we think. There's so much more to the human experience than acquiring things.
Oh, for sure. Which I think is idol worship as well. That's just blinding you. Well, I know you got a nice house. Okay. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, if we got to be minimalist, we got to be just like us and God, and we are heirs to the throne. Like we are royalty. If you think about it, we're royalty. So we should walk around.
The kingdom of God is our inheritance.
Yes.
So I want to just close one loop that we had open. And that was somebody who's if somebody's in a narcissistic relationship and really, really wants to get out of it, what is your advice for them?
It's a slow process. I don't think you can just break up because there's a trauma bond that's in place because of the abuse. So a lot of times it'll take a few times unless you go no contact. Okay. Like I think I just got my last year and a half. I pretty much started to just do my own thing and live my own life. And I didn't care what he was doing. And he lived in the burbs. I'm in the city. And so it was like kind of like I didn't care anymore about him. And I took care of me. But I know we broke up a few times in the 4 years. And the trauma bond would always cause us to get back together. So I actually went to a neurochiropractor, neurofeedback. They did neurofeedback on my brain. And my brain was in fight or flight, like he said, the majority of the time. And because of that, I then started to go and they put electrodes on you. And then there's this like machine where you have to like hit, balance and all that. I started to change my brain chemistry. And as a result of changing my brain chemistry, I was able to break free of that. That's before we broke up even. It was just part of the getting rid of the fight or flight, because I'm in fight or flight. Therefore, I don't know. I can't think straight.
I just want to say about that, about people who are in fight or flight. I mean, that is the society that we had before COVID. And, we're going to see pre-COVID, post-COVID. That's kind of the way the world's going to be, I think, for the next probably 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And, what COVID has done, it has required us to really calm down.
Yes,
right? We've had to stay home and calm down. And when we're in this high stress, got to go to work, got to get things done, you think about all the infertility, right? And why is it that we're infertile? We're infertile because we're constantly in stress, and our bodies aren't going to get pregnant when we're in stress. And so the way, this is why I think meditation is so important, because when we have, our brains are connected to our heart, which is connected to our gut, which is connected to our adrenals, which is getting, so it's all connected. And so when we can lower our stress levels, we can do that through meditation. We can do that through thought. And what we have to do is get ourselves out of, what's called high beta, the high beta brainwaves. That's probably what they were talking about for you.
Yes.
Get us into more in the alpha state. And the alpha state comes when we forgive. And forgiveness is the key to return to love. And
that's huge.
Yeah. And so
forgiveness
again,
is key.
Forgiveness is key. And again, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, or if you're recovering from a narcissistic relationship, the biggest key for you to get free of that is to forgive.
Amen.
And while
and the
it
bitterness,
seems
resentment, let it go.
And you may think a lot of people think that forgiveness is letting the person off the hook, but it's not. What's forgiveness is for us. Forgiveness is to free us. And then we can say, that has nothing to do with me. That's not what it's not, it's nothing to do with me.
Truly. And I know, I just feel like when I was able to leave, it was like, I always feel like I have wings on the back of my neck. And I feel like they're always like down flat when I'm in a relationship. And as soon as I get out, I'm just like, I feel like I just start taking flight. There's like a freedom, and I felt so free after that.
Yeah.
And yet I think in the midst of it, I was feeling the freedom within before I was able to get out. And I think that's key. What you were saying, a lot of the suggestions you're making of getting healthy and healing is key.
Yeah.
Just take care of you, and then the relationship has to change, or it has to end.
Right. That's true. So was there anything else you were hoping to share?
Well, you were just mentioning the breathing thing. I was just thinking about how this whole year has been like, we all took a gasp when we learned Kobe Bryant died, right? Mm-hmm. And we all took a gasp, and then COVID hit, and then the earth started to breathe again. And then the whole disease itself, the virus itself, affects the lungs, which is breathing.
It's more than lungs.
I mean,
it affects the whole vascular system too.
Yeah. And it's beyond my frame of knowledge. I just know what it's done to people's lives in terms of reset, recheck. And I know a lot of the extroverts are really mad at it, but I just think of like how God breathed life into us when he created us. And it's like, breathe. All God's saying is now breathe, 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 breathe. And so I think that is key in the relationship. If you're in a narcissistically abusive relationship, or any kind of relationship that just doesn't feel healthy, you have to take the steps for yourself. You need to own yourself. Stop pointing fingers. Stop worrying about what they're doing. And again, if they're cheating, that was like my out, because I was grateful that happened, because he just found new supply, right? So he found new supply. Thank you. Okay, we're gone. I'm out.
Radical
and
responsibility
it was a gift. It was a great relief. I was like, yay, now I can move on, and he isn't going to come chasing me because he got somebody else. So, hey.
Right.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
Well, my name is amyperras.com. So PERRAS, AMYPERAS.com. And I'm also, like I said, on YouTube, Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid, podcast, Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid. And that's Instagram. I have Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid, and TikTok as well. Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement today. And
thank you, Dr. G.
Really, really excited to, see how this goes going forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, if you have questions about the topics covered in this or any other podcast, I invite you to open a conversation with me via email at info@menopausemovement.com or on Facebook Messenger through my Facebook page at Dr. Michelle Gordon. That's DrMichellellegordon. I also want to invite you to join in our next beta group. Here at the Menopause Movement, we are always trying out new methods of teaching and the best ways to get on top of your menopause symptoms. We regularly run beta test groups where we create a learning experience valued at $2,000, but at no cost to you in exchange for feedback and testimonials. To get notified of our next beta group, simply sign up at beta.menopausemovement.com. And thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. I appreciate you.